You're listening to The Gorge. This is a podcast where my friend Sara and I gorge ourselves on overanalyzing a game or game-related item every week. Today we are overanalyzing Bioshock Infinite for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC.
And we hate it. I was like sitting here like listening to you doing the intro, and literally the first thought that popped into my head was, wait, it was on the PS3, wasn't it? Because I've been playing my PS4 so much lately. I'm like, everything's on the PS4 now, right? No, dumbass. It's not.
No, this game's old.
It is kind of old now. Like 2012 or 13.
12 or 13, around that. I should probably put the date it was released in this intro too, but that's okay.
Nobody really cares because we hate Bioshock Infinite. Hey!
Yeah, we do. So, it's very, and I want to say right off the bat, I don't like saying that Bioshock Infinite is a bad game.
Yeah, because I want to like Bioshock Infinite, you know?
It was a game that I really had a lot of high hopes for, wrapped entirely around that 15-minute gameplay demo.
Oh, God. Yeah, I think that's kind of what they were going for, and I feel like, and I don't want to, overgeneralize, I guess, but I think a lot of people who still want to defend Bioshock Infinite to the death are the people who really, really just want to like it after seeing that 15-minute game demo. And it's like everybody is just in mourning for the game that will never be. Because really, truly, that 15-minute demo is the game we all thought we were getting, and we totally got nothing of the sort.
There's literally nothing in that demo that appears in the game. I watched it recently just to kind of refresh myself of it. Remember, what's the one scene that you think of the most?
The horse?
In that. The horse.
Yeah.
The horse. Everyone, the first thing you do is you think of the horse scene, because that's a very good scene that's very indicative of who Elizabeth is as a character, what her abilities are, and how Booker reacts to it.
Right.
There are 0 horses in Bioshock Infinite.
Yeah, they replaced them all with those shitty mechanical horses that don't do anything.
There is also, I don't know if it was in the 15-minute one or it was in the really, really early one where Booker is voiced by a different guy. Where it's the woman sweeping the porch.
That's still in, that's actually in both trailers, I think.
I think it is, but that scene where she's sweeping the porch while her house is on fire is another thing that we didn't get.
That's actually, it's kind of true, but it kind of isn't. Because there is actually, in Bioshock Infinite, a woman sweeping a building on fire, but it's a store and not a house.
Okay, well then I was wrong.
It's in the same area as Comstock House, I think.
Okay.
It was such a small, little callback to that original trailer that it almost doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It almost makes, considering kind of the fact that they cut so much of the plot from Infinite that we were supposed to get, it almost doesn't make sense, because the implication in the original trailer was that she wasn't just crazy because society was falling apart, because at that point in the trailer, society hadn't entirely fallen apart. She was just crazy because of, the weirdness that was going on.
Because of the time distortion stuff.
Yeah. That's why she was crazy, but in, the game, she's just crazy because society's collapsed. It's two completely different contexts, so it kind of loses some of its eeriness, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, and you know what's really crazy is one of the advertisements for the game, when the game was coming out, when the game was finalized, one of the commercials you would see on television featured Elizabeth with a noose around her neck.
Yeah, that was weird.
Which is something that absolutely nothing like that occurs in the game.
And the fact that, I guess if they were the fights you see, dramatic game trailers, those are common these days. The ones I think of are, the one that really got it all started was that Gears of War Mad World trailer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, the Gears of War Mad World trailer, that fight kind of happens, but not in the same context. But the whole point of it was that it kind of showed the drama of it and what you were going to be dealing with in the game, right?
It was symbolic.
Yeah. The problem with the TV commercial that you saw for Infinite was that it means nothing because in Colombia, nobody would try to hang Elizabeth. She's literally the most important person in the city. It would never happen. Like, if she was more ostracized, like a witch or something, then even if that never happened in the game, it would make sense because it's kind of like showing the player, like, oh, this girl is totally innocent, but everybody thinks she's bad. But that's totally not even what happens. I literally think they rewrote Infinite like 6 months before the game came out.
Oh, totally. Because then this is something that, like, we mentioned it, I think, last week talking about it.
Probably.
And it's a theme that'll come up a lot in stuff like this. Is they either went too far or didn't go far enough. And this, there's a lot of thematic elements throughout Infinite that the first two Bioshocks really explored their themes in depth. And one of the notes I have, and I kind of want to stress this a lot because it's something that I think is really important, that really separates the 1 and 2 from Infinite, and the fact that Infinite doesn't go far enough with its elements, that there are things in the Bioshock, like, because it's called a Bioshock game, so you expect certain elements of Bioshock.
Right.
You expect the powers. You expect either vigors or plasmids. You expect monstrosities that you will do battle with. Big daddies or handymen or, what have you. The problem is that in Bioshock 1 and 2, plasmids and big daddies of the game, Rapture falls
absolutely.
Because of power struggles involving getting Adam and people splicing themselves and their hunger for power. The entire game is wrapped around that, and Big Daddies are an element of that, because Big Daddies are this sign of Rapture's inevitable decay, because you have these hulking monstrosities walking around the city, trying to protect the source of everyone's power. So you have this sort of reason that the Big Daddies exist, and they're so tightly tied with the plot. Whereas Infinite, Vigors and Handymen are literally carnival sideshows.
Yeah, they're literally, I mean, like, they thought they were being clever by saying that Fink was using tears to communicate with Suchong and steal, like, the ideas of plasmids from Suchong and Rapture and, like, try to get that whole idea of, like, the greedy 1910s industrialist or whatever, and you couldn't see me, but I, like, rubbed my hands together like Snidely Whiplash. Those Dover boys. But, like, I totally get that. It was all added. I mean, I really think that the entire game was rewritten right before it came out, because the handymen they serve no purpose. They really don't even have an emotional tie,
it's like this. It's like
know?
It's in the same thing. It's a perfect metaphor I have is when you tie it to the original trilogy with the prequels for Star Wars, which is in the original trilogy, C-3PO and R2-D2 are there because they are tied to the plot and they are important characters that fit the roles that they're put in. They exist in the prequels because fans expected them to be there. Vigors and Handymen exist because it's a Bioshock game. They don't exist because the story requires them to. They exist because you're expected to shoot fire out of your hands and fight a big monster man.
And I honestly would love to see, because I feel like there was something ambitious happening in that 15-minute gameplay trailer. I would really like to see the original script of Bioshock. Infinite.
Oh, of course
we'll
not.
never see it, of course. They probably, they probably burned it when Irrational went to a small-scale developer. But I would really like to know where they plan to go with that after that 15-minute demo, because you see there's a handful of things in the demo that we do see in the game, specifically the part where Songbird attacks you on the way to Comstock House, but everything else is completely different. And spoilers, probably the biggest thing that jumps out to me is the Comstock reveal, because when you watch the trailer, they show pictures of Comstock, and he's a young guy who doesn't look anything like Booker, and he's a completely separate character. Like, there's paintings of Comstock in the game, or not in the game, but in the trailer, where he looks completely different. Like, he's nothing like a younger or an older Booker. He's his own person, and that trailer was a year
so
before the game
it's very clear
came
they had to
out.
rewrite a ton of stuff, and So, and this is something that I've thought about as well, tying into that, and why I feel like that, why it really stands out, is we talked about last week how there is the big twist in Bioshock 1, which is the "would you kindly" phrase. In Bioshock 1, and we talked about how great that twist is because there are references to it, but they're not overt, so that you can't quite pick it up. It's subtle, but it's there, and you might notice there's something a little bit odd, but the reason twists in general are effective is you put hints of the twist in, so that the reader kind of suspects there might be something up, and then they get the twist and they go, "Oh, that's why that happened, and that's why it makes sense."
Yeah, it's
and now and then everything like, "Oh, it all clicks together. Now this all fits together perfectly."
Yeah.
Bioshock Infinite's reveal of Booker and Comstock being the same person has no build-up, has no depth, no explanation. It literally comes out of nowhere.
There's literally one teeny tiny suggestion that they might be there's two technically that they might be the same person, but it's not nearly on the same level as the "would you kindly" hints, because the "would you kindly" hints follows you through the whole game. And one is the priest, because Booker instantly recognizes the preacher, I guess, because those are two different things. I don't know. Anyways, is the preacher, and then the other is Wounded Knee. Like, there's that weirdness that, like, Comstock insists he was at Wounded Knee, but Slate insists that he wasn't. He never saw Comstock there ever, but Booker was there, and Slate knows Booker. So, like, it's all like you kind of have that minor suggestion that there's something weird going on, sure. But
no,
it's not enough. Like, it should have been pushed more. If they were gonna go for it, 100% make Comstock Booker. Then there should have been way more oddities beyond the fact that you can explain it away as Booker is uncomfortable and Comstock is a liar. Yeah.
Because in that scene where Comstock demands he's at Wounded Knee, earlier in that bit, you also have Elizabeth talk. You have the whole thing where everything in that museum is all lies. So you just think, oh, it's just another lie added to the pile. It doesn't stand out as being a weird oddity compared to everything else. If the museum was wrapped around something, say, maybe Comstock knows too much about Elizabeth's life, and the museum is full of all this stuff about Elizabeth and inflating things that people shouldn't know about her, but she's weirded out about that, and then you get, oh, and also I was at Wounded Knee, and they're like, no, you weren't. Then it would stand out more, but it's not, because all he does is lie.
Yeah, exactly. The whole point of Comstock's character is that he's just one big liar. He lied about where Elizabeth came from. He lied about, who killed his wife. Yeah. All those things. He's a liar at his core as a character. And so when they say Comstock lied about being a Wounded Knee, well, okay, Comstock
he lied about a lot of things, so it makes sense. So it really feels like that twist just comes out of nowhere, and because of that, it completely falls flat and fails to impress the audience, because it doesn't matter.
And it's completely... It does feel like a twist.
Exactly. That's the thing, kind of the theme about Infinite, is that Infinite feels like a retreading of 1 and 2, and it's doing all the things that 1 and 2 did, because you expect them to do that because of it's Bioshock.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of this feels like they were getting closer to the day the game was supposed to come out, and Ken Levine went, oh god, the game we planned is not even remotely ready, and we can't push it back anymore, because I've heard rumors, and I guess I should cite my sources, but I can't. I'm not going to go Google it. I'm lazy. Somebody go find it for me. But generally speaking, I've heard that the development process for Infinite was a total
Didn't they say something
nightmare.
3 games worth of content was cut out?
Probably.
There's a quote that gets thrown around a lot, and I have no idea if it's valid or not, but I've heard it quite often that there were a significant amount of portion, several games worth of content was cut out from Infinite at the end.
Oh yeah. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And, so you hear that this game's development cycle was such a nightmare because I guess Levine, who took his auteurness of video gamey crap too far, it was suddenly like he was changing his mind constantly. He didn't know what to do, and you can see that a lot from the first trailer to from the very first trailer with Elizabeth in yellow at the window to the game itself. you can see a massive change in just what the game
in everything from
supposed
tone,
to be.
from aesthetic to to character design to depth and all that. Excuse me, all that just getting completely. And obviously, you expect changes to happen as the game develops, but everything developed for the worse.
And also, it was really jarring. Like, every single Bioshock Infinite information we got was something completely different. Like, we got the original trailer of Elizabeth in yellow, and then we got the second gameplay or the first gameplay
where
trailer,
she had weather powers.
Where she had weather powers, and Booker was voiced by, I think it was originally the voice of Garrett from Thief, and she had more like real legitimate witchy powers. And then a year later at the next E3, we had the gameplay trailer that we all know. And, I mean, you can just tell that, like, by looking at all of these different trailers and the final game, you can just tell Ken Levine had no idea what he was trying to make. I mean, he even at the last minute changed Elizabeth's face. Like, at the very last minute, he found a hot cosplayer and was like, well, let's make Elizabeth look like her instead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to keep comparing him to this, and I don't like using this excuse. He George Lucas'd his game.
I mean, he completely did. The game is so overdeveloped that by the time the time the game had come out, it had been in development for like 3 or 4 years, and I'm sure Irrational was running out of money, and they said, well, okay, we cannot possibly implement all of these ideas because we can't decide on what the hell we're making. Let's just make Bioshock 1 again, because people like Bioshock 1, I guess. So, it very much stinks that we ran out of ideas, we ran out of time, and so now, let's take this game that is completely nothing like what we expected and kind of empty, honestly, and let's tie it into Bioshock 1 with the DLC and retroactively.
I do want to talk about real quick before we dive more into that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's another.
Yeah.
Another bag,
There's one thing I want to talk about. Just the comparison is that everything in Bioshock Infinite, from the story to the mechanics, especially the mechanics, is lessened compared to Bioshock 1 and 2. And the first thing that stands out more than anything, and it's such a point of frustration that every time I had to encounter it or deal with it, lessened my opinion of the game, and that is the 2-weapon limit system.
Oh, absolutely! Like, it's gamey. And
because
mellow.
The fun thing about Bioshock 1 and 2 is that you had a whole slew of weapons available to you at any time. The idea is we want to encourage weapon switching. Okay, you know what really encourages weapon switching? Having all your weapons at once.
Absolutely. It makes no sense. That's such a step backwards. Like, that's such a 2000 game development.
It's so annoying
decision.
because I've just recently played Bioshock 2, and I surprised myself. I didn't realize how often I was just cycling through every weapon and just switching mid combat. Okay, spike launcher. Okay, no, pull out the bolt gun, pull out the machine gun, pull out the shotgun. Just constantly swapping out weapons and ammo types and all that. And in Bioshock Infinite, it's just you were stuck, and it wasn't even like the idea of weapon switching, because you would go through chunks of the game where every enemy had the same 4 or 5 weapons. And then you'd go through a new chunk where you got the next set of 4 or 5 weapons, and you didn't really get to rotate often.
Yeah. And there's no and I'm not sure if I'm remembering this right or not, but there's really no weapon swapping or weapon modifications in Bioshock.
The only you can do mods, and this is a nitpicky thing, but I loved it in Bioshock 1 and 2, was watching crap get slapped onto your gun when you went to the Power to the People station, which is the coolest thing in the world, because I love details like that, like watching, in Bioshock 1 it was a Jack slapping on whatever parts he could to make his gun look cool. In Bioshock 2 you were going through more solid looking upgrades, and your gun was it came out looking much better. Bioshock Infinite's upgrades were basically you can hold more ammo, or you can reload faster.
Yeah.
And it was kind of amusing to crank up the shotgun's reload animation to as high as you can go, and watch Booker shunt like 5 shells in a second. But it was just like, it's just like not. There's no depth anymore. In Bioshock 2, you would get a new ammo. You would get new ammo types. You would get your gun can ricochet bullets if you got the machine gun upgraded to the maximum. There was no like cool upgrade for that. It was just you can shoot faster, it does more damage, or it reloads faster.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I feel again like it was a casualty of the downgrades that we had from the 15-minute gameplay demo to the game we got, was that the trade-off was you didn't have a ton of weapons, but Elizabeth's powers would function more in a combat setting than they ultimately did. Like, the trade-off would be, well, you can't upgrade your guns, but Elizabeth can bring in trains and things like that we saw in the original gameplay trailer. And it was like, oh, well, that's cool. That's really a cool kind of step up. And it was even insinuated that Elizabeth's powers themselves could be leveled up eventually, so that you wouldn't be changing your guns, but she would be getting stronger and able to do more in a combat situation. And that was completely neutered, but they left the other limitations. And they
exactly. And we saw that in the first gameplay trailer, the short one where Booker is the different voice actor, where Elizabeth had her elemental powers back, and she served as a sort of replacement for the Bioshock 2 mechanic of constantly slapping plasmids onto plasmids. You had the what's it called, the tornado plasmid that you could slap different elements on.
And that was kind of like what she functioned as in a way. She was there to upgrade your plasmids or your tonics or whatever vigors they were called. She was there to upgrade that instead, and
it didn't materialize.
It just never materialized. It seemed so. With every iteration of the game, it became more and more neutered and more. And I know that there were hardware limitations. There's always hardware limitations, but we had a whole huge.
But to not follow up on any any of those ideas is just I can think of a few like scenes right off the bat. There's the bit in the first gameplay trailer where Booker uses telekinesis to steal guns, and that didn't appear in the game.
Yeah.
That was a cool thing that did not appear in the game. It was Elizabeth using contextual things to create lightning storms to shock enemies, that you had to fire the electro bolt in to activate it. That didn't appear in the game.
Yeah.
Her tears are limited to cover, giving you ammo, and that's like summoning a motorized Patriot to around. So that's what we got instead.
And all of that stuff is really low HP, so it's ultimately totally useless. Like, I really could probably count on one hand the number of times I used her in a combat situation. Like, I never used, she could spawn, like, the grappling hook, the skyhook things. She could spawn those to take you to higher points.
But there was no reason, because they didn't provide any cover, and there was no tactical advantage to going up there.
Yeah, and the drones you could spawn, like little machine gun drone-y things, were always really low HP, so they die fast. I mean, it was all just just felt so slapdash.
Yeah,
like
exactly. And even the vigors themselves were also hindered by the 2 limit, because you only could have 2 in your quick select at a time, as opposed to just having them all in the circle. It was It's just
It makes no sense. It made no sense. I mean, we're both trying to talk over each other to say the same thing.
Yeah, it didn't add anything. It hindered progress because you could only be stuck with 2. Now, granted, there is one thing that got out of the 2 vigor limit system, and that is I got to name my my favorite combination, which is my what's it called, the electricity one? What do they call it in Infinite? Shock Jockey. Shock Jockey and Murder of Crows.
Shock Jockey, yeah.
That combo, I called it Shock and Caw.
Oh god! Oh my god!
Okay, and then
it begins. I thought we could make it the last 2 podcasts, we've been great. We haven't put up any fucking puns, and I was like, yes, I've done it. I've broken him of this terrible habit. No, I'll never escape you and your stupid puns.
Now,
my God, I hate you.
Now listen, I do think I will give Bioshock Infinite one prop, and that is that Murder of Crows is the best name for an ability ever.
I have a Murder of Crows t-shirt
that's
because I love
such
it
a
so
cool
much.
name for an ability.
It's just so, I mean, like, I literally think that was 95% of what made me so interested in Bioshock in the first place, or Infinite in the first place, was that first ever, and thank God they kept that one thing from the first ever gameplay trailer, where he finds Murder of Crows,
and it says Murder of Crows on it, and I'm just like, that's good.
And you're like, that's so cool. That's so good. But all the other plasmids are so
here's the problem with the Vigors, especially, and the Bioshock. Obviously, I can't really say like, oh, they retreaded the same thing, because they did the same thing with 1 and 2. It's you still got Electrobolt, you still got Incinerate, you still got Telekinesis. Obviously those carried over. Mm-hmm. The problem with Infinites is that Infinites switched from having trap plasmids like Electrobolt and the Tornado and stuff like that, and basically made every single Vigor, except for like 1 or 2, made them offensive. Shock Jockey deals damage now. Whereas Electrobolt didn't, unless they were standing in water, Electrobolt didn't deal damage. It just stunned them.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Devil's Kiss and Shock Jockey, and then they're all just different ways to do damage now.
Could you not lay down? I'm trying to think. You couldn't.
Because that's the other thing is like each video you got ended the same way. Hold down to throw down a trap, and it was just they walk on it and it explodes and it hurts them. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's it. Yeah.
The only special thing was that you could create chain lightning by throwing down a bunch of Shock Jockey crystals.
Yeah, I think if you upgraded your chain lightning, it would make their heads explode, which was kind of cool. But otherwise, it
got rid of a lot of the being forcing you to be creative with stuff, and that's kind of the thing about Infinite is that it takes away all the creativity.
Yeah, I mean it's basically like a big Disney ride for a video game, I think that's a pretty common criticism I've heard of the game since not day one, because everybody was riding the hype train, myself included. But in the subsequent months, we were all like, "Wait a second,
this is shit!
Played like
they played us like a damn fiddle!
Wait a minute! Damn you, but yeah, it was like
the most telling thing about that is how fucking linear the game was. It was.
Oh God! Right? There's literally no alternate routes or.
Now, yes, Bioshock 1 and 2 went in a basically one-way path, but you dropped off in an area and you get to explore this whole area, and then you leave the area and go to a new area. Whereas Infinite's just a lot of going from place to place, and there's not a lot of exploration or finding, recordings or finding Easter eggs or secrets.
Yeah, it's because there's no friggin' recordings in the game.
There's less recordings in Infinite than there are in Bioshock 1.
There is a staggering difference, too. It's not just like, oh, well, Infinite only has, 120, and Bioshock 1 has 120.
Yeah, it's
30
like, I think there's a difference of 40.
I think I read, and I feel like, if anybody ever is listening to these things, one day I'm going to get somebody in my Tumblr being like, you bitch, there's exactly 88, and Bioshock 1 has 125. Whatever. I think the number is a significant
chunk less.
Yeah, I think it's like 80 versus 120, something like that. It's a huge amount, and most of them aren't about, and we complained about this last week, but I'm going to do it again. Most of them are about the plot. They're not actually about Columbia, at all. So Columbia never gets to be like.
They're about Elizabeth or the Lutesses or Comstock or anything like that. There's no recording of just a guy complaining about his day, which is you got a ton of that in Bioshock 1 and 2, which is just like little 3 or 4 part stories basically, where you'd find different recordings and they kind of stack together with one another. And they were just about life in Rapture.
And it gave you an idea of what it was like to live there. Like, you really have no concept. By the time you leave Rapture, well, technically, by the time you leave Rapture, Bioshock Infinite, by the time you leave Columbia, finally, you really still have no real concept of what it's like to live there.
You just have the outsider perspective.
Like, and you have all these little shooting gallery areas that are like, well, here's the stores, and here's the amusement park, and here's the big scary castle / horror segment of the game. And there's nothing like... You have no idea of what anybody else in the world is like. Going to the Comstock house, basically, when you're going to rescue Elizabeth, there is not a single voxophone in that entire area that doesn't deal with
And they're all,
Elizabeth.
by her.
You have no... Yeah, they're all by her, and they're not... So, they're... that's, an ideal time
to really explore the lore of it.
Put voxophones... Yeah, and put voxophones
we know Elizabeth's there.
Or another
We're going to rescue
there.
her. We don't need to know what she's up to. We know she's having a bad time. We're trying to rescue her.
You can hear her screaming the whole time you're in there. Don't worry. We know she's having a bad time.
We know things are not going well for Elizabeth.
I can't... The decisions, again, it was all... They changed their mind last minute. They're like, let's make it more like Bioshock 1, but without anything that made Bioshock 1 endearing, including, because we need to get to it, just the fact that it has no idea what it's about. It doesn't know, like you've always said, you don't know if it's about racism, or is it about, quantum mechanics? Is it about, a father-daughter thing?
It jumps around from plot to plot, and the most ridiculous thing about it, I think, is that it's not even about that, because the idea, if you remember, the idea is that you go to Columbia and it's on the verge of revolution, right? And it's okay, well, everything looks kind of peaceful now. It's kind of harkening back to the fall of Rapture, the New Year's Eve revolution. So everything looks nice and pretty right now, and then you kind of explore a bit, and then oh shit, things are falling apart. But if you remember, you don't get to see Columbia fall because you teleport to a dimension where it's already falling.
Oh my god, right? I know.
Yeah,
way to completely miss the
they
point.
jump past the part where we actually get to see the revolution happen, and we skip to the part where Booker is apparently already part of it.
Yeah, Booker inexplicably becomes the martyr of the revolution, and it makes no sense, and suddenly him and Daisy are besties, and none of it, you're just sitting here I mean, it's a cool concept. I love dimension hopping stories. Everybody likes Quantum Leap.
I do too, but it doesn't it doesn't fit here because it ruins the emotional impact of actually seeing it happen.
Yeah, it was almost like they started making the game and they're like, cool. The idea is we're gonna make a game that's like Bioshock 1, but unlike Bioshock 1, where you get there and it's already gone to shit. We're going to make it, right before things go to shit, and it's going to be cool. You're going to get to see the city alive and beautiful, and you kind of get an indication of that in all of those trailers that we keep talking about. But then, they're at the very end of it, literally, you spend 10 minutes of actual playtime in Rapture without...
Columbia.
Rapture. God. Thank you. In Columbia, without things, going awful... And then they're like, oh, whoops, by the way, now it's all deserted. There's two segments where you're not, hiding from people. And it's the part at the beginning and the part right after you get Elizabeth out of the tower. And that's it. You have no other indicator of, Columbia before things go all terrible. It's like a movie plot. Everything's so streamlined and boring. You're just there for the ride.
More or less, yeah. And it's so because in the end it just doesn't have any emotional impact. There's no emotional impact.
And in the end nothing matters. It literally at the end of the game, I don't understand. I think Ken Levine was trying to be clever.
Oh, he was absolutely trying to seem smart.
By giving you all these choices and then having none of them matter at the end.
It's okay. So here's I've actually thought about this, and I have the perfect metaphor for it. The idea is that Ken Levine wanted to subvert player expectations because Bioshock 1 and 2 we have choices, and our choices matter in very subtle ways. We talked about last week. There's no good or evil bar. There's no moral bar that you can check your status on. It's your choices will give you the ending that you deserve as a player. And Bioshock Infinite gives us several points where we can pick between one or two things. They don't matter at all.
None of them matter.
And the idea is, okay, haha, we're subverting expectations, constant variables. The idea of that is, okay, the idea of we're subverting expectations. Good. You should do that if the audience is becoming complacent. The thing is, the way you did it would be like, okay, Nintendo is releasing a Mario game, but we're going to subvert expectations. Mario can't jump in this game.
Yeah, it's just so smug. Like, that's all it comes across as, ultimately, is just really smug.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you thought all of this stuff you were doing mattered, but in the end, I, Ken Levine, can feel smart. Because I'm having this nihilist worldview where nothing you do matters, and I literally think what would have saved Bioshock Infinite for me as a player, like, I would make this a much more glowing review if they had done literally one thing. And I think about this all the time, is if at the end of the game, when you are standing in the river with Elizabeth, right?
Yeah.
And her, like, billions of clones are about to drown your sorry ass, if you had been able to accept, and again, it goes to the whole, pick your color ending, whatever. Go with me here. If you had been able to go, she says, well, I'm going to baptize you, and I'm going to get rid of Comstock and Booker DeWitt. And if you had gone, okay, or if you could have gone, hell no, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens is, she shoves your ass under anyways, and then you just wake up back on the boat with the Lutesses again, and literally start the game over.
That would be way better than what we got.
It would have been awesome, right? Because it would have been like, what the fuck am I literally... And you literally could just replay Bioshock Infinite in a loop. And just keep doing the same thing over and over again, like the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
And it would have been awesome. You would literally just be like, start by choosing that ending, you would be picking a new game every single time.
Yeah.
And like nothing would ever change. And then Ken Levine could still feel smart because at the end of the day, your choices really don't matter. But you're still doing something kind of subversive. Yeah, you're still doing kind of subversive because it's like, oh hey, look, you just started a new game. Now keep playing ad infinitum, hoping something will go different, but it never will. It's the definition of insanity. And it would have been awesome. That one little thing could have fixed all of that. If that had happened, I would have been like, game of the year, all years, let's do it. Yeah, hell yeah. That's it. That's all it took.
But instead Booker dies and the game is erased forever and it didn't happen.
And then Elizabeth... Can we talk about Muriel at sea now?
There's one thing I want to cover first before that. The minute you go to Rapture in the main game is the point where the game completely shit the bed.
Yeah, like, but I mean that part was cool. It's kind of like the jumping the shark moment, Fonzie on his motorcycle.
Yeah, it's that part where like you go to Rapture. To me, that feels like, and this also ties into Burial at Sea. So we'll get to that in a second. I want to say,
yay!
That feels like going to Rapture at the very end and having Booker be like, "Oh, a city under the ocean. That's crazy." That feels like...
What the hell up, Troy Baker?
That feels like they had no faith in their own product at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And like at first it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like,
at least,
cool.
If you didn't have that bit, then at least you could say, well, at least they didn't go to Rapture at any point, and at least they didn't tie it to Rapture, and they didn't tie it to Bioshock 1 and 2.
Like they promised.
Yeah, and then they do anyway.
Like they said... when that first trailer came out and they showed that shot of something under the water, and you're like, ooh, is it a third Bioshock game? And then they pull it out and it's a fish tank, and you're like, that was clever.
Yes.
And you're like, haha, they're not going to tie it to Infinite at all, or to Bioshock 1 or 2 at all. It's going to be its own creature. And that's what Ken Levine kept on saying over and over and over again. And then it was not. Infinite.
And then it was not.
And then it was all over.
There is one more thing I wanted to cover right before that. I just thought of it. It's just another small lie that we were told. Again to the thing of your choices don't matter. Remember in the early game and the early things, like the way you treat Songbird will affect your relationship with Elizabeth?
Oh god, yeah.
Remember that? And how that didn't happen at all?
Man.
Like, there was zero of that?
There's barely any of, like, Elizabeth's relationship with Songbird at all.
Yeah.
Like, Ken Levine and his high horse, him on his white marble throne of video game authorship, he was very much like, well, you know, Elizabeth's relationship with Songbird is kind of like an abusive girlfriend, or a girl in an abusive relationship. And you're like, oh, that's kind of, you know, an interesting way to think about it.
Interesting,
like,
at least.
Yeah, she's still, you know, she loves him, but he's not, you know...
He's controlling and sort of manipulative.
You don't
and
get any of that.
The idea that, like, he's obviously bad for her, but if Booker tries to fight him, she'll get angry at Booker because she still loves him and needs him.
Because he's her only friend. Like, that was the idea, is that Songbird was her only friend ever growing up.
And then, no, it's nothing. She just drowns him in rapture.
Yeah,
it's
and she's
over.
Like, oh, let go.
Yeah,
Bitch,
she's a Disney princess.
What are you talking about? You don't even know what you're talking about anymore. Like, there's no indication that she even liked him at all.
Yeah, beyond the fact that he was kind of like her big robot bird pet.
Yeah, and, like, that's kind of it. It's like having a dog that bites other people, not really, like, a real friend, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just can't... And there was nothing really, like, there was no reveal with Songbird. Like, weren't we all waiting for that moment? Like, the big twist in Infinite should have been, not that, you know, Booker was Comstock, it should have been that Booker was Songbird. I mean, we all know that, right? Like, Booker should have been
if anything, Booker should have been Songbird in, like, some sort of weird, you know, Delta thing.
Yeah, like a weird alternate dimension Delta thing, and you're like, yeah.
Because here's the interesting thing. It's kind of interesting, I guess, because it ties to Bioshock 2 more than it does Infinite. The idea of constant variables. There's always a man, there's always a lighthouse, there's always a girl.
Right.
Delta is the protagonist of the Rapture verses.
Yeah.
Because Jack is not an outsider. Mm-hmm. Jack does not rescue a girl. Jack only goes to the lighthouse because he left the lighthouse and then came back.
Right.
Delta is the outsider. Johnny Topside is the outsider. He is rescuing his daughter, and he came there because he found the lighthouse.
Yeah.
So Delta is the Booker.
Yeah.
So, and which is funny because Ken Levine hates Bioshock 2.
I know, and it's like you literally just remade the plot of Bioshock 2, but not as good. Mm-hmm. You literally made the plot of Bioshock 2, but you somehow managed to make it worse than a game that is kind of like considered, you know, like
considered a lesser product than its predecessor.
Yeah, and yet somehow you still managed to make a game that was more disappointing than that. And I wasn't disappointed by Bioshock 2 at all.
We love Bioshock 2, as we said last week.
We love Bioshock 2. But, you know, I guess people have, like, you know, everybody has their own opinion. They can have a wrong opinion, but still. But, like, there was nothing really to do with Songbird at all, and that was what everybody was waiting for. And again, I guess Ken Levine thinks he's being smart by subverting expectations and say, well, Songbird's just some poor random asshole. But, like, there's no real poignancy in that then.
Yeah, I felt nothing when he died because I didn't get a chance to interact with him in any way.
Yeah, and if they hadn't, again, like, if we're trying to make Bioshock Infinite the same game that we got almost with, like, the most minor changes, not like revamping the whole game entirely, then if we had gotten no other interaction with Songbird whatsoever, but Songbird was Booker, then you would still feel more for Songbird when he dies, because
it would change the way you perceive what you just played.
Yeah, exactly. And then ultimately you don't get that at all. You get the Comstock reveal instead, which we don't even really get a chance to know Comstock either.
Yeah.
So there's just, I don't know. I wish I could
it's hard to pinpoint exactly, like, where the disappointment lies, because it's just a general, like,
blanket, like a blanket of disappointment over the whole game.
A blanket of failed expectations and false promises.
And tragedy and poor writing decisions. I mean, we could probably spend 2 whole episodes talking about this. The underutilization of Lutesses, which is weird, because Lutesses are in the game a lot, but they still seem like massively underutilized.
So, and here's a perfect example of that, is there's a very early point in the game where you kind of, you're walking around Columbia, and you see the statue of Robert
turned into Rosalind, yeah.
Yeah. Nothing like that ever happens in the game again.
Yeah.
It is the only time you see, like, a weird temporal flux, but that is not created by Elizabeth.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, again, hey, I'm going to keep referencing that trailer, the whole idea of the plot that we were kind of given in that trailer, the 15-minute one, was that, well, all of Columbia exists in a kind of temporal weirdness because of Elizabeth's existence inside of it.
Yeah.
So this was supposed to be like a common thing that you saw a lot, and like the game kind of makes these implications even then, like in one of those little the little eye viewer thingamadigs, that people are seeing the tears around town, that they're not like, but they don't really do anything, they're just like little glowing tears, and everybody's like, don't worry about it. But so the idea was originally that Columbia was supposed to kind of exist in a dimensional weirdness that never really materialized either, and that one thing with the Rosalind/Robert statue was supposed to kind of, you know, be, I feel like it was supposed to be a bigger thing, like you were supposed to turn around and see, you know, signs changing and stuff, which was again a thing you see in literally every other trailer in the game. Was even in like the first one, when there was like an indication that, hey, maybe there's something more to this game than meets the eye. In the very, very first gameplay demo with the different voiced Booker, there were signs changing in the background. Like there were signs. You have to go back and watch it again, and I haven't seen it in so long. But there's literally like stuff in the background that changes from like one shot to another, and you're like, something weird is going on here. Herm. But then again, it never materialized.
And that's just another pile of disappointment, another scoop of disappointment onto the pile.
Another scoop of disappointment onto the ice cream sundae of sadness that is Bioshock Infinite.
Okay, so let's get to it right now.
Are we talking about Burial at Sea?
Burial, or as I call it, Burial at Seething Rage. Okay.
Disappointment at sea.
So, all right. So here's the thing: is playing Bioshock Infinite.
Wait, I gotta say something real fast. Clarifying, I never played Burial at Sea, but I know enough through you and through the internet to hate it. So go ahead. You've
watched. Okay, so playing Infinite. At the very least, I felt something at the end. It was disappointment and confusion, but I felt something. Mm-hmm. When I finished Burial at Sea Part 2, I felt nothing.
Oh, that's so sad.
I didn't care.
Oh, that's awful.
And that is worse.
God, it's
Burial at Sea is pointless.
It literally is.
I don't like to say that a lot. I don't usually use that word unless it's very specific, because I think everything should have some sort of significance in anything. Burial at Sea is pointless. There is no reason for it to exist. It does nothing to enhance the story. It does nothing to enhance the gameplay. It is just nothing.
It's almost overwhelmingly nothing. Like, how do you take an entire game that wasn't awesome, but it was like a solid 5 or 6, you know, like a D plus. How do you take a game that was like a solid D plus and literally reduce the entire game and any like emotional poignancy that might have happened? And I did have a few moments of Infinite where I was like, oh, you know, mostly the parts involving like when Anna was taken from Booker and things like that. You're like, oh God, oh my God, like that part is actually kind of sad. How do you take any lingering, remaining emotional depth that the game might have had and reduce it to the prologue for Bioshock 1? How do you take all of Booker and Elizabeth's story, however middling and disappointing it might be, and you literally say their entire character arcs exist for the sole purpose of furthering the plot of Bioshock 1.
And here's the thing, it's not even furthering it, because the story that they tell, that Elizabeth is the reason that Fontaine got the code word and she set up so that Jack would come back. We didn't need that.
No,
we know that Fontaine is a scumbag and a traitor and manipulative, and he conned and tricked his way into getting the phrase. That's all we needed.
You really don't need an explanation. Collectively, like 8-hour long explanation? Because
6 to 8 hours long, yeah.
Yeah, those DLCs were major ripoffs as well, because there's literally no content for the amount of money they charge for them.
It's gameplay wise, you get less options in your gameplay, especially playing as Elizabeth in Burial at Sea 2, because Bioshock is not a stealth game. Infinite's not a stealth game. The stealth in Burial at Sea 2 is terrible. So basically, playing as Elizabeth is like playing as Booker with half the available equipment and a quarter of the available ammunition.
Amazing.
Amazing. It feels so pointless. Playing the DLC like that. DLC like that should have changed your perspective on the Bioshock trilogy, but it didn't.
All it did was change my perspective of Ken Levine's ability to write.
Yes. And the most frustrating thing is, again, harkening back to they didn't have faith in their own brand. Mm-hmm. All the trailers we got for Burial at Sea was the big one we got was Elizabeth going into Booker's private eye office.
That creepy flirting with her dad moment.
Yes, and which is weird because she knows she knows he's her dad at that point,
it's really
and
weird.
she still kind of is weirdly flirty and sultry with him.
It's creepy.
And so, but like the idea is, okay, well, we're going to have a DLC pack that takes place pre-Fall Rapture. And that's going to be cool because they had the opening part where you got to walk around pre-Fall Rapture and go to shops and like talk to people and you know sneak your way into what's his
Cohen?
name? Cohen, yeah, into Cohen's thing. And then after like an hour of doing that, it's we're going to the shit part of Rapture. We have to fight splicers again.
The abandoned part of Rapture.
Yeah, so that it can all be decayed and flooding like we're used to, and we can fight mutated splicers like we're used to.
It's all just the same. I mean, like they were so friggin' eager to just remake Infinite or 1.
And it's also frustrating because they couldn't commit because they still have Booker drinking the plasmids, which frustrated me till no end because that's not how it works because they're needles. That's like one of the parts where I'm just like, and it shouldn't bother me because it's such a minor thing, but like it does because that's not consistent.
It's like if the rest of Burial at Sea had been worth a damn, then that one little inconsistency would have been like, they forgot, whatever.
They're just reusing animations, whatever, big deal.
But
like,
kind of shrug it off, you know.
But like with
this, other things.
It just stacks because it just shows more laziness and more unwilling to commit to their product and just playing it safe and being afraid to try something new, which is disappointing because Bioshock 1 was such a new idea.
Yeah. Oh my god, absolutely. It was just such a cool, you know, they were really interested in the aesthetic, they were interested in like kind of the moral questions that were getting asked, and frankly, knowing everything I know about Burial at Sea, I don't even really know like what the moral question is supposed to be. I guess it's the same thing that they were saying to Daisy, which is like, you know, your part in the play or the play itself. And don't get me started on that. I mentioned it to you the other night. Where it was like, why would Daisy Fitzroy let herself be killed for the sake of like the daughter of the
just because the Lutesses told her to,
who she shouldn't even trust in the first place?
Yeah, she shouldn't care
because. For one, the Lutesses are literally the embodiment of like the oppressive system that's completely ruined Daisy's life.
Yeah, she would know that because she would know that they worked for Comstock.
Yeah, exactly.
So why should she trust them in the first place? Why would she care about that?
Why would she care about her role in Elizabeth's story? And like that shouldn't matter at all to her.
Even that is a rollback from their own fuck up.
Yeah.
Which is, we needed some reason for Elizabeth to go hardcore, so we'll have her murder someone. And that was kind of a shocking. It was poorly written, but it was a shocking moment. And then in Burial at Sea 2, they roll it back and say, "Oh no, it was meant to be that way. It was supposed to be. It's okay. Daisy's still a good person. Don't worry."
Yeah. And
it's okay. Sorry.
What a colossal fuck up of the Lutesses character. Kind of like the character arc of the Lutesses that we see play out in the games, where. You know, Rosalind is a bit of a colder individual, and Robert is actually the bleeding heart, you know, nice guy of the duo. So, like, and the whole reason the game even gets started is because Robert is like, okay, I can't be a part of this world we've helped create, and we've basically doomed the world by giving Elizabeth these powers. Either you help me make things right, Rosalind, or I am going to leave you. You know, and so you're like, oh, well, Robert's a nice guy. He wants to try and set the record right. You know, he wants to do this good thing. And then, nope, he's just gonna convince Daisy to get killed by Elizabeth? That makes no sense.
We need you to threaten a child so that you can be murdered. Okie dokie.
Okie doke. And it's like, so it goes completely against Daisy's character. Yeah. It goes completely against Robert's character. None of it makes any sense. Like if they were so friggin' all-knowing, then why did they even care? Oh god, I'm like thinking myself in circles. My head hurts.
And it's just it's so annoying, especially because the whole idea behind Burial at Sea itself falls apart and ruins the ending of Infinite. However bad the ending of Infinite was the idea was that it erases all bookers, except for the one in the epilogue, which you're not even sure which booker that is, or if he even still has Anna, or what, and it's just kind of like a weird mystery. And then, in Very Let's See, it's like, oh, we need you to get this one that Time forgot?
That somehow got away, which
Yeah.
makes literally no sense from their own writing standpoint.
Yeah, their own logic is that you either become Booker or Comstock because you go to because all Bookers will go to the baptism.
Right.
And whether or not they go through with it is what the variable is. The constant is they all go there.
Right.
Except for this one, I guess.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Like, that goes completely, like, it is completely detached from their own writing logic. The logic being, if you smother him in his crib, as Booker puts it.
Yeah.
If you kill Booker at the point of divergence, it should theoretically, or it should, by their own writing, like the laws of their own universe, it should destroy in an instant every single Comstock and every single Booker, except for, God willing, the one that we see in the epilogue.
Yeah.
So
there's just the idea that there's just one that just kind of, like, wasn't there.
But
and
how? That's so counter to, again,
and the only explanation we get is that he had Sally and he's actually old and busted. And
but I don't understand how that works. Like,
it chopped off Anna's head instead of chopping off her finger.
But he's still Comstock.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. Like, there's still no reason for him to be there.
None of that should have happened. If Elizabeth and all of her creepy clones drowned Booker in the hypothetical, moment of truth at the very end of the game, then how is there still a Comstock to cut off Anna's head?
It's just so dumb.
It doesn't make any sense.
It's dumb and pointless, and you can't even erase it as like a non-canon thing because Burial at Sea Part 2 is directly tied to the beginning of Bioshock 1.
Exactly. It's supposed to be canon, but it makes no sense. It's not. It doesn't follow any of its own internal logic, and that's really important in these, like, fantasy stories, is like, well, they're doing all this crazy stuff, but it still follows its own internal logic so you can accept it. But if they can't even follow the basic premise of the ending of their game, then how does any of this make sense?
How can it have any validity at all?
Yeah.
As a story medium, because Ken Levine is such a pretentious ass talking about how meaningful and deep his game is.
It's so not. It's really not.
Yeah, and it's not. And there's nothing wrong with having a game that's shallow.
Sure, I love shallow.
I mean, like, comparing it again, it's Mario.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can make a solid game that doesn't have a deep story to it. If you wanted to make a Bioshock game, it's just kind of chill, and it's just like, hey, we want to make a Bioshock game where you shoot fire out of your hands and you shoot bad guys and you run around and kill a bunch of people and
you're in Rapture and it's cool.
It's action-packed Bioshock. Like, if you want to just make a chill Bioshock game just using the same mechanics, that's fine. You can make that. But don't try to be pretentious and, like, try to be deep with your story and then pull back and play it safe anyway.
Yeah, I'll never ever forget reading in, like, one of those, like, Game Informer, back when Game Informer was relevant, like, in one of his interviews he's saying, like, oh, it's not tied to Bioshock 1 at all, it's its own story, and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool, and then there at the end, they couldn't even commit to that.
No.
They couldn't commit. I mean, that's all it is, really. Bioshock Infinite is a story of Ken Levine's fear of commitment.
Yep.
That's the theme here, people. The theme I'm taking away from all of this is not objectivism is bad, or collectivism is bad, or racism is wrong. I mean, racism is wrong.
Yeah, it is, but...
But you know what I'm saying. Like, that's not the theme I'm taking away from any of this. The theme, that, quantum mechanics makes no fucking sense. The only thing I'm taking away from any of this is that Ken Levine is afraid of commitment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, before we wrap it up, I do want to talk just a little bit.
Let's go for quickly. It. Oh, it's fine. We can talk as much as we want.
I want to talk about some of the things that, after all of that we just said...
60 whole minutes.
Some of the things that Bioshock Infinite did right.
Did it?
It did a few things right.
It was pretty.
It was a very pretty game. I want to buy the art book for this game.
I'm gonna buy the art book for this game. Yeah, because you can get it. You can get it as a 2-pack.
Yeah.
Well, you can they, on Amazon, last night we were looking up the price of the Dishonored art book, and we'll talk about Dishonored later. And like, it was like, hey, these two items are frequently bought together in this Dishonored and Bioshock Infinite. And I was like, ooh, neat,
shocking.
I'll just buy both.
There are a few things. I wish it had been more of a father-daughter relationship, but there are a lot of scenes in the game that are genuinely endearing and entertaining between Booker and Elizabeth.
The bee scene?
The bee scene where Booker is so, like exasperated at her being afraid of a bee.
No, it's gonna sting me.
Yeah, just the way he reads that, just kill it line.
It's so
is good.
I mean, that's what really saved Bioshock Infinite a lot, is the fact that Troy Baker and what's her, Courtney something or other?
Courtney Traynor, I think.
Yes.
Taylor or something like
Courtney
that.
Taylor, something like that. Anyways, those two did a really good job with their voice acting, and that helped a lot.
Yeah.
Because like all of their kind of back and forth interactions are really funny. Like that part where she drops him from like when she finds out she playing her, and he's like, I need to go,
Oh yeah, the scene where she drops him off the balloon, and he's like trying to get her to grab his hand or to pull him back up, and he has. There are two lines where he says, I just need enough guns to fuel an entire uprising.
Yeah.
Or he just kind of trails off, and then there's the line where she's like, oh, from where? One of our many friends and allies?
Yeah, like that's all really good. Like,
both of those, so they had a lot of, and there's also a scene where they get to the weapon tools needed to repair the weapons for what's his name? The weaponsmith guy.
Yeah.
And they both get to them, and they realize that it's a very big machine, and they both realize they have no way of getting it out.
And, like, they never thought about that once. I kind of like the idea. Like, people complained, like, they're both idiots. I kind of like that about them.
It was very endearing because, like, it shows that they're just they're really, like, rushing headlong into things, and they're not thinking about it.
Yeah. Like,
and there's really also the one of the best lines in the entire game.
I know which one you're about to say.
Elizabeth, why is your mother a ghost? Now, to be fair, that boss fight was terrible, and I hated that boss fight, but that bit alone was good.
Oh my god, that whole, that part is so good. And tying into that, I mean, really, the Lutesses are the single greatest part of Bioshock.
The Lutesses are hilarious.
Oh my god, I mean, like, we need more characters based off of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Because,
because just... There is that one bit in the beginning of the game where you first meet them, and where you first get your shield.
Yeah.
And you're given the pistol, and you can shoot at Rosalind, and she will 5 times comment about you missing.
Missed it again. Yeah, it's awesome.
Or if there's a part where there's the piano that you have to push, and if you hover around there, they will comment about how you're not moving.
Oh, and they also, the part before that scene, actually, the aircraft, the airship crashes, and they're playing the Songbird's song on the piano, and Elizabeth's like, Booker, come help me open this door, for God's sakes, they're gonna bring him back. If you just kind of, like, sit around and listen, and it's really kind of sad, because Elizabeth the whole time is like, Booker, hurry! But if you listen to them, they spend that whole segment arguing about the notes, and it's the exchanges are so good. It's like, that's the wrong note, and like that whole back and forth is so good. They're really funny.
They are great characters, and there's also the part in the very beginning of the game where it's he doesn't row. No, he doesn't row. Oh, I see what you mean.
Like,
it's just they were such funny and interesting characters, and there's also the voxophone you find before they meet where Comstock's wife accuses Rosalind of sleeping with Comstock to produce Elizabeth.
Right.
And she goes, excuse me, A, you, B, he's sterile.
Yeah, oh, it was great. Yeah, the line is, because I have like 90% of their lines memorized, because sometimes I've told you this before, I'll sit around at my job and just listen to scenes from them talking, because I like the way their back and forth is so much. Her line is, the man is quite sterile. And I was like, oh my god, she's just like they're just so fun, and they
God
kind of
bless you, Jen Hale.
I know, right? they represent so much of like what Infinite could have been, because they kind of have a push and pull play with the player.
They feel like they came from the early demo.
They do. They totally do.
Like they weren't altered or anything. They were just ripped straight from the early demo temporally and thrust into the new Bioshock Infinite we got.
And they just make commentary about it the whole time. Like the
good.
He Doesn't Row exchange, where it's kind of like poking fun at the fact that Booker, by the limitations of the game, doesn't row. Like, I think that's really clever, and it was kind of like, you know, you're playing parts like that, and you're like, oh, this is cool. It'll be more of a commentary on, like, kind of player expectations. And it was, but it was in a bad way, like we said earlier.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, the Blue Teslas are so good. They're
such interesting characters, and I would have loved to see more of them throughout the entire game. I would have loved and it's funny, the next closest thing you get to that, really, is playing Arkham Knight with Joker's ghost following Batman around.
Oh my god, that's like such a good thing.
Which it's such a great like plot idea of this character like that doesn't technically exist,
but does exist.
Yeah, like it half exists in a state that only really affects the player.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was it's so clever, and the kind of the moments where they do appear, and to give Bioshock Infinite the credit it marginally deserves, they do a fantastic job of making the Lutesses oscillate wildly from being really funny to being genuinely sinister.
Yes.
Like, to being, when you see them in certain lighting, you're like, oh, fuck.
It reminds you that they are holding all the cards and you have none of the cards.
Yeah, that part when you're going to rescue Elizabeth, I love it, because I like the idea of repetition in video games. You don't see it enough, the would you kindly, but just the idea of phrases being repeated as a thematic thing. But when you go to rescue Elizabeth and he can hear her screaming off in the distance, and the Lutesses are between him and the doorway, and he says, "What?" And they say, you know, why do you question what when the delicious question is when? Lives, will live. Dies, died, will die. And it's a line for line rereading, of the funny part in the graveyard where they're talking about Lady Comstock, but they bring it right back around to it is exactly the same line.
But they turn it into something way more sinister, and it's because it's in a different context, and it's a context that's weighted more, because in the context of Lady Comstock, she's already dead.
Yeah.
In the context of Elizabeth, it's she might die if you don't hurry.
And technically, by that point in the story, Booker is in the future, which was another cool concept that I'll kind of touch on.
Oh yeah. The Comstock house bit where you go to the future and it's all dilapidated and falling apart, and you're fighting those weird Ben Franklin men.
Oh god, so scary.
Is probably the highlight of the game.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's genuinely terrifying.
Twist.
And there's one part where you realize just how terrifying it is, and that is the moment when you realize that the enemies don't drop ammo.
Yeah. Oh god, that part was awful.
You have you don't realize it quite at first, but as you're running low and you're searching the bodies, you're realizing, oh god, I don't have anything. I'm going to run out.
Yeah, it's like, why would they have ammo? They're crazy house patients, you know?
But it's like, oh god, I'm going to run out of the thing that will protect me.
Oh, and it was so that whole segment was so good.
Especially, and it's kind of a retreading of a bit in Bioshock 1, but it's worked so much. I think it's one of the few things that Infinite did better. When you activate the elevator.
Oh god, that jump scare!
And then you can't walk backwards, so you turn around and boy of silence.
Oh god, that jump scare is so good.
Got me. It got me.
I've told you, I've replayed that game 4.5 times, and it gets me every single time.
I'm like, even though I played it, when I played it again, I'm like, I know it's coming, but I don't want to turn around.
And you can't walk backwards. Yeah. That's a really smart little, gameplay thing right there. That was clever.
Yeah, and yes, it is harking back to Bioshock 2 or Bioshock 1 when you get when you first go to the dentist's office and you turn around and see the splicer in front of you. But Infinite did it way better because the Boys of Silence are terrifying.
Oh, they are so terrifying, and it also helped that that whole segment is so scary because of the no ammo thing that it was, you're already so tense from all of this other stuff that little moment of tension is, that moment when the tension snaps is so good, because you're just like, oh god, I'm gonna die, you know? Yeah. Like, oh man.
And here's another thing, and this is kind of a personal thing, so I don't know if it affected anyone else. If it did affect you the way it affected me, please tell me in the comments or whatever.
We should get a Twitter.
Yeah, I should get a Twitter.
I'll
set up a Twitter after this.
Yeah,
but so there's something that affected me really well, and that's okay. So in that area, once you've cleared everything out of there, and you have to ride the elevator down, the elevator is in the middle of the room, basically.
Yeah, it's really creepy.
It's kind of like in the middle of the room, and it's and you see the arrow. You can have the arrow you can press to kind of guide you where you need to go. The green arrow, because they didn't have the compass arrow like in Bioshock 1 and 2. They had the green, trail.
Yeah.
Once you cleared everything out, the elevator is very small, and you're kind of desperate to get there, or at least I was.
Oh, yeah.
You're desperate enough that you're not paying attention, and it's possible to walk past the elevator. So, I did that, and then I hit the arrow, and I was like, okay, where do I go now? So I hit the arrow, and the arrow it's kind of like it leads me like a figure eight. Like a figure eight around the room, because okay, you missed it's like a GPS. You missed your turn, recalculating.
Yeah.
You go this way now. So I kind of went around like a figure eight of that room, and after 2 or 3 tries at that, still not finding the elevator, my thought was, oh god, they're doing the thing where the rooms just keep looping until I trigger
like
the right thing. Like it wasn't out at the time, but PT. Or it's oh god, I'm in a temporal flux where it's repeating itself. This is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Oh my god, what am I? Oh, I'm walking past the elevator. I'm an idiot.
Oh, man, it would have been awesome if they did that, though, right?
It would have been really cool. And I don't know if anyone else did that, but that was an unintentionally really effective way to scare the crap out of me.
Oh, I understand. And I guess a final thing, because that area is so good. In retrospect, that area is all really, really well done, except the fact that there's no fucking voxophones that have anything to do with anything other than Elizabeth, but whatever. Yeah. The reveal at the end of that area is so good.
Oh, yes.
God, help me. That scene is so perfectly done.
Yeah, the reveal of
it doesn't even feel like a part of Infinite. It feels like a part of a game we should have gotten.
Yeah, because it's you have the reveal where Elizabeth is standing in the darkness, and Booker has just gone through this huge ordeal to try to get at her, and she reaches out for him and she pulls him up, and you can see that she's old. And then she opens it up, and you see that she is leading the destruction of New York City.
In the 1980s.
Yeah.
This is so good.
And then you're just
so good.
That was the twist that worked.
That twist was so.
That was a genuinely shocking moment where it's because Booker is just so baffled and just terrified and confused and reflecting what the player feels in that moment.
Remorseful and bringing it back to the would you kindly twist and the fact that they set it up but really subtly. All of Elizabeth's voxophones and all of the little flashes of conversations you can hear through tears and stuff.
Yeah.
It's setting you up for thinking, okay, well, I'm only a little bit late. It's only been a little while.
Because all the voxophones there are from Elizabeth in her early 20s or teen years. She's still a young adult in those voxophones.
Well, no. You can't really prove it because her voice is all kind of the same. It's just a little bit
but I mean, is you see the portrait. You see the portrait, and it's young Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's the point, though. They're just using Elizabeth's portrait. There's no guarantee that is the same Elizabeth. But that's a really smart thing to do.
And there is something really subtle about those. Exactly. If you look closely at the portraits, Elizabeth has a black eye.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's a really subtle detail that just really kind of you notice that, and it really heightens up the tension. Like, oh dear God, I need to save her now, and no, you're too late.
Yeah, you have no idea. You think, okay, something went fucky, and, Booker comments that it's July, but why is it covered in snow?
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, something went weird, and I'm only a little bit late. I cannot possibly, because all the voxophones and all of the vocal snippets, they're young Elizabeth, and you're thinking, yes, I can still pull this off, everything will be fine. And then you get to the end, and all of those hints are just wrong.
Yeah, and then she even has that line, where she says, it's not the torture, it was time.
Time. Oh, God,
that was one of the best scenes in the entire game.
Oh, and it was such a cool set piece to just see New York being destroyed.
Yeah.
Let's be real, it was an awesome set piece.
That was amazing.
It was so cool. Oh, man.
And then, as a final touch, just to cap it all off, dang, I would have loved an entire 12 to 14 track album list of old-timey versions of modern songs.
Oh man, right?
Holy, like those, the Everybody Wants to Rule the World and Shiny Happy People.
And the Beastie Boys, no, the
Beach Boys. Beach Boys.
Boys.
If they did the Beastie Boys song,
That was amazing!
if they did not want to fight for the right to party,
Oh my god,
that would have been the best thing ever.
See, the problem is, and this is a total tangent, but whatever, just bear it with me here. I mean, we can just talk as much as we want. The reason I always get those two mixed up is because, you know that part in Futurama, like that one episode of Futurama where they go to the Beastie Boys concert?
Yeah.
And they sing Sabotage in the style of a barbershop quartet?
Mm-hmm.
That is why I always get the Beach Boys and the Beastie Boys mixed up when it comes to Bioshock Infinite. Because all I can ever think is, oh my, it's a mirage, telling ya all it's a sabotage.
I would have loved if Sabotage had been a song in Infinite. Oh my god, that would have been hilarious.
Oh my god, it would have been incredible. Could you imagine? I totally need a whole soundtrack of that. You're right. And actually, because it is cool, it's another cool thing they did manage to do. Like one or two of those songs was composed by a guy who runs a YouTube channel who does like vintagey versions of modern songs. Yeah, so they actually called that guy up and they're like, "Hey, you want to do some music for Infinite?" So like that was pretty cool.
That's really cool because
I'll link you. I'll send you a link to that channel afterwards.
Awesome, perfect.
Yeah, and we can maybe post it with this as well when it goes up.
Yeah, totally. I'll link that as well. Yeah, it's just those little things like those, the Lutesses, the Comstock House portion. It's just those were ingredients that could have made the Bioshock Infinite that we all wanted. And we could in Universe B, in the universe that Elizabeth makes a tear in, and we're in the next dimension. We could have gone to the dimension where Bioshock Infinite is a game where Elizabeth is an ostracized witch with elemental powers, and Booker has a much cooler looking rail thingy.
Yeah.
And I love the little disc instead of the big claw thing.
Yeah, the big claw thing was just an excuse to give you another melee give you a melee weapon without actually having to take up, like an actual slot.
Yeah, an inventory slot.
But whatever.
But we could have had that game, and we could have had a game where, speaking of Booker and Elizabeth having great dialogue, the what's the line they have in that trailer where it's that's just making him more angry. Oh,
and in the 15-minute gameplay one, keep looking, Lincoln.
Yeah, they didn't have the Lincoln scene.
They didn't have the Lincoln scene because, again, they rewrote the game 6 fucking months before the game actually came out, so it would make no sense for the Columbia we got to be like selling Lincoln dolls because they all were super racist and hated Lincoln because he freed the slaves or whatever.
It's just like that. That was such that was such an iconic scene for everything we got about Bioshock was Elizabeth wearing the big Lincoln head.
Yeah, and we didn't even get it. We never got that. Nope, because Bioshock Infinite is literally just a big blanket of disappointment. Mm-hmm. And I hate Universe B because they always get the good stuff. Those bastards.
And I mean, I know Irrational imploded. But
because of Infinite, actually, it sold super well, and they still did not manage to make enough money. Can you believe that?
That's
that really is all you need to say.
And I don't want to say good because I'm sure there's a lot of really talented art there, talented studios and developers and programmers and all that, and I hope they all found work, But like, it deserved to happen to Ken Levine because he fucked it all up.
That's such hubris. After you make such System Shock is really good. They made that, and then you made Bioshock, which is really good. You'd think he would know how to do this, but I just cannot believe, when you think about it in long term, just how much of Bioshock Infinite was changed, right at the last minute.
So here's one of the most telling things about it, and it's something I very rarely see. I'm trying to kick the habit, but sometimes I'll go to V.
Oh god, you poor bastard.
And V hates everything.
They do.
V is one of, as a collective, is disappointed in that we didn't get the good Bioshock Infinite.
Oh, Absolutely.
even they cared enough about that to be like watching, because like there was like a thing where like a thread like a month or so ago where they showed like, hey, remember this, and they had the 15-minute trailer in there. And everyone was like, I can't believe we didn't get this game.
Because it was such a cool looking game. Everything about that trailer is just so cool.
Yeah.
Like, just the version we got was so bastardized. It was like watching a Ubisoft video.
Yeah, we got
Ubisoft!
Ken Levine did to Infinite what Ubisoft does to its graphics.
To everything. Oh, man. I guess that's a good way to end all of
Yeah,
this. I think that's a good note to end all of this.
Yeah.
Ken, we got Ubisoft. Softed. Ubisofted? I'm ruining the joke.
Yeah. Everything was Ubisoft.
Motherfucker. We should talk about Ubisoft.
So, that'll do it for us. Thanks to Broke for Free for use of our background music. Link to their work in the description.
We talked for almost an hour and 30 minutes.
I know. I'm super proud of us.
I need to make
fuck Dima.
Fuck Dima. Fuck Dima. Always.
All right.
Fuck Dima. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.